Okay. Hello, everyone. Today we're going to be reading chapters 9 and 10 of Midnight on the Moon, our fourth grade buddy reading, our first and fourth grade buddy reading book. Here we go. Chapter 9, Morgan. Thank you, Morgan said softly. You have freed me from the magician's spell. Jack just stared at her. You were Peanut? Annie said. Morgan nodded and smiled. Really? You were with us all the time? Said Jack. On all our missions? Morgan nodded again. Why did we have to go on this mission to find a mouse? Said Jack. If you were always with us. To break the spell, we had to be on the moon, said Morgan. You could have broken it the minute we arrived. Oh, that's what Peanut, I mean you, were trying to say, said Annie. We didn't have to leave the moon base at all. Morgan nodded, smiling. But the moon man came along to help us, said Annie. He drew a constellation of a mouse. Is he a friend of yours? Morgan shrugged. Let's just say we had a little talk. He stopped by the moon base while you were out. The same way you had a talk with the ninja master, right? Said Jack. And the monkey and the sorcerer? Morgan nodded. I always squeak to the ones who helped you. But how did they understand you, a mouse? Said Jack. Morgan smiled again. Certain wise ones understand the language of little creatures, she said. I bet it was you who turned the pages of the books, said Annie, to show us where to go next. Morgan nodded. But who turned you into a mouse? Said Annie. Morgan frowned. A certain person who likes to play tricks on me, she said. His name is Merlin. Merlin? Said Jack. The greatest magician who ever lived? Morgan sniffed. He's not that great, she said. He doesn't even know I have two brave friends who help me. Us? Said Annie shyly. Morgan nodded. And I thank you both with all my heart. You're welcome, said Jack and Annie. Morgan handed Annie the Pennsylvania book. Are you ready to go home now? She asked. Yes, said Jack and Annie. Annie pointed to a picture of the Frog Creek woods. I wish we could go there, she said. The treehouse started to spin. It spun faster and faster and faster. Then everything was still. Absolutely still. But only for a moment.
Chapter 10, Earth Life. The midnight woods woke up. A breeze rustled the leaves. An owl hooted. The sounds were soft but very alive. Jack opened his eyes. He pushed his glasses into place. He smiled. Morgan was still there with them. He could see her in the moonlight. Her long white hair was shining. Morgan, can you and the treehouse stay here? Said Annie in Frog Creek. No, I must leave again, I'm afraid, said Morgan. I have been gone from Camelot for a long time. She handed Jack his pack. She brushed his cheek. Her hand felt soft and cool. A bit of moon dust still on you, she said. Thank you, Jack, for your great love of knowledge. You're welcome, said Jack. Morgan tugged on one of Annie's braids. And thank you, Annie, for your belief in the impossible. You're welcome, said Annie. Go home now, said Morgan. Jack smiled. Home was Earth, that bright, colorful world where everything was alive and always changing. Bye, Morgan, said Annie. She started out of the treehouse. Jack looked back at Morgan. Will you come back soon, he said. Anything can happen, said Morgan. The universe is filled with wonders, isn't it, Jack? He smiled and nodded. Go now, Morgan said softly. Jack followed Annie down the rope ladder. He stepped onto the ground. The wind started to blow. The tree started to shake. A loud roar filled Jack's ears. He squeezed his eyes shut. He covered his ears. Then everything was silent and still. Jack opened his eyes. The ladder was gone. He looked through the trees and branches of the giant oak tree. Where the treehouse had been was only moonlight now. Bye, Morgan, he whispered sadly. Bye, Peanut, said Annie. Jack and Annie stared at the top of the tree for a long moment. Ready, said Annie. Jack nodded. They started for home. The midnight air felt cool and moist. It was filled with the soft sounds of earth life. Jack and Annie left the Frog Creek woods. They started down their street. Annie glanced up at the sky. The moon looks really far away, doesn't it? It did, thought Jack. It was. I wonder how the moon man can be up there all alone, said Annie. What do you mean, said Jack. I mean, who helps him put on his spacesuit, said Annie. Who helps him get up when he falls down? And who is he, added Jack. Who do you think he was, said Annie. He must be a scientist or an astronaut from Earth, said Jack. No, I think he's an alien, said Annie, from another galaxy. Jack scoffed. What makes you say that? I just feel it, said Annie. Wrong, said Jack. There's no proof that aliens exist. Maybe not now, said Annie, but don't forget, we were in the future. Oh, brother, said Jack. They crossed their yard and climbed their back steps. Annie tiptoed inside the house. Jack followed her. Before he shut the door, he glanced up at the moon. Was Annie right, he wondered? Could the moon man have come from another galaxy? Morgan's words came back to him. The universe is filled with wonders, isn't it, Jack? Good night, moon man, Jack whispered. Then he closed the door. All right, friends, that's our story for this week. We will go ahead and have another one for you next week, so be on the lookout for that. Thanks. We love and miss you. Bye.